Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Aren't we so excited to have such distinguished guests on the board? Now, when we think about this is the past 3 years or so, we had COVID. Now we're post-COVID. We have generative AI, the geopolitics issues. I think it presents us as business leaders to unlearn our assumptions that we gained from the past and to rethink how we frame our business environment. And we would like to learn from our distinguished panelists and have a great discussion to stimulate us for the rest of the day. So we have a lot to cover, but let's start with digital transformation and generative AI. Now, to kick off the discussion, I first like to have Inagaki-san speak about how you view this change, because many of us are on the receiving end, so to speak, of this digital transformation. I think your business is too, as a life insurance company.
Thank you, Makiko-san. I'd like to start on the plenary, what Jesper has commented. So generative AI will be a generative technology like the telephone or the car. So it will change the way we do our lives and the way we do our business. And recently there was a report from the World Economic Forum titled Jobs of Tomorrow, Large Language Models and Jobs. And in the report it says that the two industries that will be most affected are the financial service industry and insurance and pension management. So Dai-ichi Life, we are naturally in that business, so we are so affected. And I read that report very thoroughly, and it was a very good report. It basically said that there will be the LLM will replace some jobs, so there will be automation. But at the same time, there will be an augmented segment that will increase the productivity in a large scale. And also there are jobs that has less exposure to this LLM technology. So I think the CEOs has to think carefully the introduction of this generative technology, what kind of impact that is have to our business. And naturally our business, as the report says, a huge impact to our business model. Let me stop here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. To think of it, life insurance is probably one of the most oldest industries and has gone through many technological disruptions over the years. So perhaps, well, we can learn from what the industry has been going through telecommunications revolution, computerization, and now it's generative AI.
If I may talk a little more. Within the financial service industry, life insurance has been the least penetrated by the disruptors. In banking sector, even in P&C insurance, digitally oriented players are now taking the market share. But for insurance, even in the market like in US or in like UK, it hasn't really penetrated our market because of the it's a much more consultative-oriented business. You don't really go to the shop and take the life insurance products from the shelves. And we have this concept, and it might be a misconcept going on. And that is the area that we are most frightened of, and be more careful about the impact of this technology.
Thank you. So now I'd like to ask Dan about the legal services and how this generative AI and technology, digital revolution will drive the future of this area. And specifically, if you have anything about DocuSign that you'd like to highlight, please do so.
Absolutely. And I'll talk a little less about the technical underpinnings because we have in Eric, one of the leading engineers and technologists in Silicon Valley. So he's probably more capable to talk about that. But the way I think about it is as an underlying technology. And I think it's important that generally, when we have these new underlying technologies that come out, think about what internet has done, over the last 30 years. In the early days, I think we can sometimes overestimate how quickly they're going to have big impacts, but we underestimate how transformative they're going to be to our lives. And I think that's the same case with machine learning and now generative AI. From a perspective of DocuSign, I think we look at it as having different effects. On the one case, it's a huge opportunity because we have a grand vision to try to be the agreement cloud, not just the signature, but the way you store those agreements and manage those agreements. And I think AI will unlock a lot of opportunity for us to get there and get there faster than we would have without. At the same time, we're probably going to get new competitors that are going to leverage technology to say, hey, we can reinvent what DocuSign has done in your core business. And so I think for us, it's a combination of those effects that are really going to have the impact. I think that's going to be the same thing for most companies. You're going to have to realize that there are threats and there are also opportunities from these technologies. And you need to be thoughtful about the near term, not assuming too much change will happen too quickly, but making sure you're preparing for the long run where the really transformative impact can happen. So Eric, I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts on specific to the technology, given that you have so much strength in the area.
Yeah, Dan, yeah, thank you. So yeah, first of all, I think, I second the comments from both Dan and Inagaki-san. And in particular, like energy, right? So the Inagaki-san mentioned the car industry, then you mentioned internet. You look at over the past 30 or 40 years, I think 3 technologies completely changed the way for us to work, learn, play, and for everything. First one is the internet, then you're so right on. Second one, I would say the smartphone. The third one is AI. This is very sustainable. I think the AI impact to the society and the business, to everyone, probably even bigger than both internet and a smartphone in the long run. So I think, from a technology perspective, I think, from business perspective, number one thing I would say, almost every company, as far as I know, you have to, especially driven from a board of directors, CEO, what's your company's AI strategy? Almost everyone should ask about that question is, what's your AI strategy? The second thing is really about technology, right? Given there is still a very new, there's so many, the vendors, so many LLMs, which one are you going to embrace? And this is also very important. In my view, in particular, you look at the collaboration industry. We just announced the AI companion a few weeks ago, right? Like a basic feature, like after the meeting is over, like a meeting summary and so on and so forth. We're also going to support multi-language. I think, from our perspective, we believe, and every model, has opportunity, but in the long run, the open source, probably is going to win, because the closed system will keep you disconnected, right? Give you a limited functionality. How to, embrace the open source, I think that's very important. And that's something what we learned here, by talking with many other CEO friends like Dan or a lot of other customers. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Eric. I have a follow-up question on that, especially for those of us who are less less tech savvy, so to speak. You mentioned that we as business leaders should embrace this technology, but where to begin? Where should we begin when we are not as technology oriented as you are?
My 2 cents is, first of all, normally you look at it whenever there's a new technology, right? You look at it, first of all, for your service, the service you deliver to customers, how to leverage technology like a new app to augment what you are doing today, how to make your service better, like a DocuSign, how can you leverage AI, make the DocuSign better, how I can leverage Zoom, and so on and so forth. This is the first thing, right? The second thing is look at your internal, a team, internal process infrastructure. How do you leverage technology to improve your productivity and efficiency? The internal system, right? How to make your employees more productive, right? What kind of other tools you should deploy or subscribe, right? Normally look at those 2 areas. So again, the technology is just technology. You have to apply that to improve your business efficiency, or ROI may not be clear. So that's the way I look at that.
Inagaki-san, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I think Eric commented on a very important point. So we are now so accustomed to using Zoom, right? And I was able to attend countless international meetings by the virtue of Zoom, we're having Zoom. But what I miss is the side talks that we do on the coffee breaks, the chats, and that is, I think that is very important in the long run. So we are kind of categorizing our works into operations like data processing that can be completely automated using AI, and the other marketing or more abstract reasoning that can be augmented by the AI, and other personal interactions like that will be less exposed to AI. And also, even though on all the categories, those personal interactions, what we first meant was our frontline sales agents, which provides human value, is definitely what can be less exposed to AI. But on the back or middle or back office works, that also needs personal interactions, communications, to be creative in the middle to back office operations. So I think that is the challenge that we have to really address in the long run.
Thank you very much. To augment the virtual aspect of work and what technology brings in our customer front and also our internal work is what we need to address. And now with that, I'd like to move on to the next topic, which is what, of course, Zoom and DocuSign allow us to do, remote work. And it's been, of course, anybody in the audience who has never used Zoom or DocuSign during the COVID crisis? We see no hands up. Obviously, these two were the lifeline of our survival during these times when we were running our business, right? Now, with that, I think the three people here are excellent in terms of helping us understand how full remote work is now going into hybrid work, how we do that, what's the impact, and how does it especially impact our effort to acquire and retain talent, right? Okay, so can we start with you, Dan, on your perspective about this issue, how we balance remote versus face-to-face work, and especially around corporate culture and how we retain our talent?
Yeah, I've changed my mind on this several times in the last couple of years, as I hope many of you have too, as you get new information. So I'll give you my answer today, but you may have read me in the past having said things that are diametrically opposed to what I'm saying now, because I'm learning more. My view is that each business is different, and each business needs to figure how to configure its workforce and deploy them as is appropriate for their business. But I generally believe most businesses that were in an office for a significant portion of their white-collar workers were there for a reason, and they probably should go back. So I don't think that's universal, and I'm sure we can come up with exceptions, but I'm pushing pretty hard on the idea we need to get people back in the office. Now, it's very difficult because you know the expression, the genie's been let out of the bottle. And a lot of employees have said, I didn't need to, be in the office the last couple of years, so why do I need to now? And I think there's a fallacy that I got wrong. At DocuSign, beginning of the pandemic, and it's probably very similar for Eric, our business took off because people were using our services. And I think we thought we were even smarter than we were. And all of our employees said, look, our productivity is going through the roof. So it must be great to work this way. This is probably better. And the reality is we had this positive shock to our business, but probably more than how amazing we were at working remotely is what drove that growth. And now I see that there's real gaps. And so the big areas for me, you mentioned collaboration, Markiko, and I think that's a key one. But I also think around building a culture, it's just much harder to build a great culture if people don't have that time together. Doesn't mean they have to be in the office 5 days a week, but I think we need to have that. And I also think for people's development, the camaraderie that they have with their colleagues, that actually makes their work more enjoyable. And it also makes them more successful in building their skills in their career. So when I think about career, culture, and collaboration, we need to effectively tell employees that they're going to benefit and the company will benefit from improved performance if we do that. But the last thing I'd leave you with here is we now have to convince them. And we have a lot of employees that say, I don't want to commute into the office. And we have to earn that commute. So we have to do things differently than we did before when no one questioned coming into the office. It was a requirement. And now we have to convince our employees, if we're in a competitive talent environment, and I think most of us are, definitely in the tech space, I know we are. And so that's what we need to do. We need to earn the commute and show them those benefits. But I also believe we're going to have to get firmer and firmer, at least in my view, if you share my view, that that's best for the employees and it's best for our customers, and therefore it's best for our companies.
Thank you, Dan. I have one tiny follow-up question on that. Can you give us like a specific example of a pushback you get from employees about coming back to the office, and how do you respond?
Well, I think there's two specific things that I've seen most common. One is that we did change the way we work, right? And for a DocuSign, the primary change was what we're doing right now. We had a lot of people collaborating on Zoom calls. There's other software out there that people use, like a Miro, where they might have a digital whiteboard or things like that. But core communications are occurring through Zoom for us, as I think is the case for the vast majority of businesses out there. And people have gotten used to that. So when we bring them back into the office, if you bring people in the office and they all are on a bunch of Zoom calls, they're saying, why can't I do that from home? In fact, it's more difficult to do that if half the people are in the office and they're all speaking and it's loud and confusing, and half the people are on Zoom calls. So I think that we've remotely, I think we've realized that that is a challenge, and we have to change our behavior and figure out how to make it worthwhile. And then the second thing is people have said, particularly if you have a lot of employees in places like San Francisco, Seattle, Dublin, and Ireland, commutes are very difficult. And people said, I gained back an hour or two a day. And now if you make me come back into the office, you're taking that hour or two back from me. And so those are the two kind of core complaints that we get. And I don't think we can answer them. The first one we can answer by designing our workplaces differently and changing the way we work. The second one, we just have to face up and say, you're right, this is more difficult, but it's worth it. And we're going to do the things to earn your commute and to make it the right thing for you to do, again, for yourself, as well as for our customers and for the company overall. And just take it hard on and say, I know it's not a popular answer. Eric, as we all know, has taken some heat. He's been providing great leadership, and maybe he can speak to that. But he needs to continue, and the rest of us need to support people that are stepping up publicly and taking that leadership and show them support. That's just the right way for most businesses.
Thank you. So the phrase to earn, excuse me, to earn the support of your employees, earn the commute, was a key phrase that stick to me. Now, Eric, I saw in the news maybe like a month ago where you've been asking your workforce to come back to the office. Out of all companies, it's Zoom asking to de-Zoom their employees was sort of the fun headline. Can you elaborate a little bit around your thinking and how you're communicating to your employees?
Sure, absolutely. I think first of all, I would say I love the audience, because when you ask a question, who uses Zoom and also DocuSign, no one raised a hand. I really appreciate. If I was there in person, I would like to give each participant in the audience a bigger hug. Thank you for your support to DocuSign and Zoom. So you are so right. Back to the headline news. Frankly speaking, I did not, realize there was a crazy number of headlines. Some of sort of a little bit not, and do not reflect what we announced. Essentially, what we announced is to let employee back to office only twice a week. Essentially, that's sort of like the hybrid work. Today, only 3 work styles as far as we know, right? Five days in person prior to COVID, or during COVID, 5 days remotely. But now most of the companies are embracing hybrid work. Even like when I was traveling in Tokyo last September, I visited many companies, customers as well. Most of them also embrace the hybrid work. So from our perspective, the reason why we had to make a change and to announce our own hybrid work, which is again twice a week, is the 3 reasons. Number 1 reason is sort of like Zoom specific. Because, given that most of our customers, they are embracing hybrid work. We build a lot of features, right, to support hybrid work, like a conference room solutions, how to reserve a desk, and a lot of features specifically related to hybrid work. So we have to put ourselves in our customer shoes. We also have to eat our own dog food. Quite often customer like Dan visit us, hey, Eric, how do you use that feature? How do you embrace hybrid work? If we cannot give a good answer, how could we build the tools to support our customer? That's more like a Zoom specific reason. The other two reasons, the number two reason, read about social interaction. Because again, in Zoom for now, Dan and I join remotely work, right? However, I'm pretty sure the experience if Dan and I are both there in person is much better, right? Because we are, human beings, we need a social interaction, right? A lot of friends there, right? So shake hands, give each other a hug is much better. Unfortunately, those features are still not available on Zoom yet, even if we're working very hard, right? That's the number one thing. Number two thing is read about the innovation and the creativity. Now, here's why. So interestingly enough, if you observe, how let's say your engineers or product managers that are working together to build a product, especially for new ideas, they debate a lot, right? And see like Dan, you and I were sitting together in a conference room, whiteboard, using this idea, this architecture. I have a different opinion. I interrupt me. Just very active back and forth debate. That's the way to innovate, right? For the creativity. Unfortunately, that's a Zoom's problem, right? On Zoom call, most of the time, every participant, tended to be very nice to each other. And it's hard for me to say no to that, and vice versa. So that's hard, right? For innovation. I found that's more like I do not know what's exactly the reason, but that's what we observe. That's the reason why, hey, we need to bring an employee back to office twice work. Again, that's not easy. And our employee also, they dislike that. So, but we have to make that a change, right? So anyway, but most of the companies today, as far as I know, they are embracing the hybrid work.
Interesting.
Markiko, there's two things I might just comment, two things I would disagree with Eric about, and it's hard for me to find those, so I like to use them. The first one is, if Eric and I were in a room on a whiteboard talking about a technical architecture, it would not actually be a very effective session because I wouldn't understand any of the things he was saying, given his superior technical knowledge to mine. But the serious one is, I actually believe that Eric, although you're right, some people were poking fun of him saying, hey, come into the office a day a week. I don't think he's gone far enough yet. I actually think I think he should be pushing his employees harder, not to 1 day a week, but to probably more like 3 days a week. And now I also know when you're on the board, it's much easier than when you're the CEO. And I don't know the answer, but my guess is, and Eric, you can probably tell us, if you look at things like CEO positive ratings, there's a Glassdoor is usually the best one that's external. I remember over the last 5 years, Eric being top, 10 almost every year, as that's out of over 1 million companies in terms of employees saying they love their CEO. I bet that number is significantly lower because he's taking on these hard issues now. I don't know the numbers, you can share if you do know them. But I just want to say that even though I think you take a hit, I think he should be even more aggressive, and not just he, but all of us should be more aggressive. When we do believe people should be in 2-3 days a week, and we kind of do it a little bit at a time, it'd be better to rip the Band-Aid off and go more aggressively. So I don't know what your perspective on that, Eric.
And first of all, I agree with you. Your guess is right on. We start from 2 days. We really seriously think about, hey, down the road, we should have supported like 3 days, right? So you are so right on. Unfortunately, I do not dare to start from 3 days, but you are so right on. So that's that's something we are thinking about in the future. Absolutely right. Yeah.
But why not 5 days again? Why do we still keep this hybrid work? Because honestly, it's so complicated for us to manage the workplace, right? Can you either of you respond, and then I'll go to Inagaki-san on what he's seeing in his business. Go ahead. First, can you to respond? Why not 5 days a week, and why do you still maintain that hybrid work is the way to go instead of full face-to-face work?
I have two answers, and Eric probably has more insight than I do. The first one is we've always had hybrid work. So this idea that everyone's been in the office 5 days a week just isn't true. At UiPath, the company I'm on the board of, we just did an analysis. We had about 23 or 24% of our employees who were hybrid before COVID. And that number is obviously significantly higher now. and about 60% want to be hybrid now. So some of them we need to change that view, doing the things that Eric described. So I think there was always opportunity for non-hybrid work. And for the people who are fundamentally in the office, there were people who found effective ways to manage their work-life balance and not be in the office 5 days a week, at some prescribed number of hours. I think that's more enlightened. I think we should be working with our employees and trusting them to find the right way, letting each team find that appropriate norm. By the way, if you're a salesperson or you're customer facing, you're not in the office. You better not be in the office every day. You better be out with customers a significant portion of your time. So I think the answer is why hybrid is, it's always been hybrid and it should always be hybrid. But there's a difference between 99%, everyone remote as we were in COVID. So that's the big thing. And the other piece I'd say is, Eric made the great comment I wish I had earlier about how sad I am not to be sitting with you all in Tokyo. And part of the reason I'm sad not to be there is because I think I would be more effective and I would learn more from the people in person. But part of it is if I came to this meeting, if I didn't have a board meeting tomorrow, prevented me from coming to Japan, I would go to a robots game with Yoshi. I would go out and have a fantastic cultural experience. I would do, go robots. I would do all those other things that make life better. And so I do think that it is valuable to acknowledge that we get extra benefits from being there in person, but you don't have to be there every day because you build relationships and you go to that game one trip. The next time you can do a Zoom call because you did build that relationship when you were there. So that's kind of my view.
What about you, Eric? Why not 5 days? Or are you actually secretly thinking of conspiring to 5 days in the office?
I think there are different company. They might have different reasons, but ultimately, in my view, is like in our case, we have a lot of newly hired employees for young generation. Young generation, you need to give the flexibility, right? They are not going to have to go office to 5 days or 4. They really want to have flexibility, right? That's one thing. For most of our employees, especially in Silicon Valley, the commute time, right? They live very far away. Just 1 way, 1 hour every day, spend 2 hours on the road. I think that's kind of a really tough experience, right? Why not let them work from home, especially if you trust the employee, have greater culture, give them greater tools like a DocuSign, they can work very effectively at home, right? So that's another reason. I think also the thing is, here is quite often, especially for our employees, like female employees, right? So work and life balance, young kids at home, and sometimes you also need to focus on that as well. So that's multiple reasons, but that's why it's hard, right? To kind of, otherwise, no matter what you do, you cannot make everyone happy. That's why I think about what's the best process change or policy to make most of the employee happy.
Thank you, Inagaki-san.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan and Eric, and also from a macro perspective, especially in Japan with this shrinking working age population. This trend is irreversible. For give you an example now, within Dai-ichi Life, there's certain employees who do dual tasks. So they do clerical offices in one of the branch offices, but they also in a team of a company-wide creative, product creation, or those kind of dual work cannot be done in the past. And these technologies really opened up a whole lot of opportunities in our company. People who have small kids, they have to work short time, limited time, but now they can stay at home, pick their kids up, and then go back to work. And those kind of flexibility is especially important in a country like Japan. And I think all the developed world will face this labor shortage in the future. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. So it's interesting that you highlighted sort of a career development type of opportunity being possible because of this remote working technology, whereas an employee who is have a certain position assignment can simultaneously take upon a more corporate-wide task because of that. And I think that's an interesting combination with what Dan has highlighted earlier. Why do we ask our employees to come back to the office? One was about their career development. So to me, it seems, of course, it's a combination that we really need to look with more higher granularity, so to speak, to how we develop our talent. What aspects do each person needs, and that's more the starting point of the discussion rather than starting the discussion from do we do remote work or not. So that was very interesting. Now, in the interest of time, I have one other topic that we'd like to cover with our panelists, which is
sorry for interruption. Sorry for interruption. Sorry for
Go
interruption.
ahead.
Just quickly, I forgot that you asked the reason. There's another reason is read about the it's like a social impact, like a green, and the climate change, right? So if we all go back to the office 5 days, we forgot about that carbon dioxide emission. That's problem. So sorry, I forgot that part.
No, that's a wonderful segue into our next topic, right? Now, the reason I wanted to discuss this sustainability topic with these 3 panelists is because here in Japan, the government has been installing a strong regulatory pro-ESG policies, including our corporate governance code and also our disclosure requirements. But on the other hand, especially in the United States, there has been anti-ESG legislature in many, many states. The most recent news I caught up was about 20 states already have some kind of anti-ESG rules. And so it's becoming a very complex environment for us business leaders to navigate in this. It's a global issue. It's it transcends national boundaries. However, these local regulatory issues is really perhaps constraining us. So I really first like to ask, let's start with Dan on how you observe your business environment in this perspective. I'll go have Eric speak on the same question as well. And then after that, I'll have Inagaki-san follow up. So from Dan, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a crisis. I wish I had a different point of view. I think that there's a broader setting in the United States, particularly where I think it's not a secret to people in Japan. We have created, a really divisive environment. You've seen that with our Congress recently, which has been, quite dramatic to have the situation with the speaker being removed. And I think that this is playing out through the ESG case dramatically. And it's important when you think about ESG, there are different components. I don't think there's a lot of issues around corporate governance concerns. I think there's a lot of efforts. There's some more regulation, people a little less focused on regulation. We don't have big differences, but it's really on the environment and the social side. And, sometimes it's important to put your cards on the table. By most people's standards, I live in the city of San Francisco, so I'm pretty liberal in the US spectrum. And some of the social issues, particularly around diversity and inclusion, I tend to be quite aggressive on supporting those moves. But I also understand that there's a group of people who we now have what we call the anti-woke, faction. And they're saying, hey, we're going too far with some of these things, and businesses shouldn't be focused on these issues. They should be focused on earning a profit for their shareholders and serving their customers. And I understand that. I happen to, again, be a little more on the liberal side there. But I think the real issue and the reason we have a crisis is this anti-woke effort and faction is effectively now attacking the core issue of climate change and saying we shouldn't be focused on climate change. And as Eric pointed out earlier, we need to be doing everything we can, including having fewer people in offices and having fewer commutes if we don't need them, because those are two offices and commuting are two of our biggest causes of emissions, which lead to the worsening situation we have on climate. So I'm very nervous that the progress we should be making on climate change, which I think is the single largest global problem that the all nations need to be focused on, is going to be undermined by this backlash on ESG. And it's complicated because I understand people that have these strong feelings. Some of it's politics, some of it's economics, some of it's religion. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that are playing into it, but we have a crisis in the United States. And I think that is going to be a contagion that spreads to the rest of the world. I think this divisiveness issue is going to spread definitely to Western Europe. and then probably to the rest of the world. So I think it's a really significant issue.
Thank you for highlighting the crisis and the sense of urgency. Eric, can you share us your view on this?
Yeah, so first of all, I second that, we're indeed in a crisis mode, right? And also, by the way, I admire what the Japan government does, right? Encourage, promote ESG initiative, I give them great credit. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But you look at the US as well. I think, I think probably, the mainstream is still very, very passionate, about the ESG, like from government, White House, President Biden, they are very passionate about what we can do differently, right? To really focus on ESG and climate change. Also, look at the high tech in the universities. I personally shift almost all of my philanthropy work to focus on sustainability. And look at Stanford University. They created the first Doors School of Sustainability. I'm also the advisor member to that as well, because look at it from academic world, high tech, I think government, we all understand. We are accountable, right? We do not want to like our, descendants, right, in the future, and to believe, wow, my grandparents, they really not accountable, not responsible, right? No matter which country, and background, this is only one Earth, right? That's why I think, from my perspective, the friends I know, and they all focus on the ESG. That's still the mainstream, and probably some noise from some other part of the maybe the individuals and the specific organizations, but here that's still the mainstream to embrace the ESG.
So, Eric, what I took from your comment is that you have a little bit more optimistic view that this is the mainstream is still pro ESG. Now, Inagaki-san, there was a PR, the Principles of a Responsible Investment Initiative meeting in person in Tokyo last week, and you were there. Can you share us a little bit about what the discussion was about, your take and your thoughts?
Sure. I attended the panel. The PRI in person lasted 3 days, but there was a panel that was dedicated to this ESG backlash and how we think about or tackle about this issue. And it's not easy, how we transform in a just manner. So, just transition is an easy word that we can use, but it is hard. So a country like, even in Japan, we depend like 80%, still it depends on 80% on fossil fuels. There are countries who depend 80% on renewables. So there's a wide variety of the standpoints, the current standpoint. And it's not an easy task. If the transformation will be a drastic one, there will be unemployment, there will be social disrupt, and we have to take care of it. But we have to also think about our next generation, that's what Eric has said. We have to think about the society, our employees, our communities, our shareholders also, but also the next generation. And it's a no-brainer that we have to decarbonize our economy. But how to do it is tough, is what we discussed. And if I can give you an imminent example, on ESG, S stands for social. And what do we do about the weapons? So, there were some argument about the controversial weapons like the cluster bombs. And do we divest those companies or producers? But we are in a war situation, and if we have to defend the law and order, providing ammunitions to the countries cannot be, said no to 100%. So how do we think about it? It is a difficult issue, and well, these dialogues, communication, this line of communication has to be kept, I think, and it's not an easy answer.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for highlighting the complexity of the issue, especially about the weaponry. I think was an excellent example to think about. But can you tell us a little bit about the mood, so to speak, of the conference and the panel? Was it frustration, despair, or was it more practical, hopeful? Where are we on this?
So people at PRI signed up for the responsible investment. So everyone was positive, and how we promote this in this backlash. So the overall atmosphere was very positive.
Thank you, thank you. That's good to hear. I think what the message here is that perhaps directionally ESG is still the way to go, but how to do it, especially perhaps the speed of change, is where we're seeing conflict. Is that a fair take on this, the conflict or the issue that we're facing right now?
Yeah, so there are some areas of greenwashing, and we have to address that. So we have to be more transparent in what we do, and on the credibility, and be more scientific, and invest in innovations. I think that is the core to overcome this challenge.
Thank you. Since we have 5 more minutes before the Q&A, I'd like to follow up because when we brought up this theme, ESG, the main topics that you have brought up was about the environment. So what about the S side, the society side? Diversity and inclusion in the broad sense is also perhaps an issue all over the world with different contexts. And Dan and then Eric, how do you see this diversity and inclusion issue playing out in your context? How important is it to you? How are you addressing it?
A couple quick things. I think the general progress that businesses in the United States have made in the last 10 years, particularly in the tech sector where I have most of my work, has been, I think, significant. It's not that we're there. It's not that we don't have a lot of work to do, but I think it's gotten a lot of focus. And I don't think there's a tremendous amount of disagreement. We do have some issues right now that we're dealing with that came out of some educational findings with Harvard and North Carolina institutions about would they be able to use race as a factor for college admissions. And I think that's now going to become an issue for businesses, and whether that's going to become, Supreme Court might rule that businesses can't do that, which would be, I think, a setback to the progress we're making. But, I was thinking about the situation in Japan. We talked about this earlier before in our pre-panel session. And, I think there's some critique that Japan has to itself that says we need to be more diverse, have more diversity of thought. But having this discussion that we just had around climate change, there are times for certain issues where we need to have everyone together and we need to be unified. And if I think about coming out of World War II, the way Japan as a nation had such an unbelievable success, I think a significant part of that came from having a oneness and a singularity that was incredibly positive, and it can pull people together. That's what we need as a whole globe to take on the challenge that Eric talked about with climate change. And I actually think Japan is well ahead of the United States right now in having that sort of unity of perspective, where I think you still want diversity of thought and you want to have diversity of background, but sometimes there just is a right answer. So I think you're getting that right.
Eric?
Yeah, so I think maybe I can use Silicon Valley as a good example, because I think the reason why you could Silicon Valley, why Silicon Valley is a worldwide innovation center for such a long time, I think it's really because of its culture. Its culture, to embrace diversified talents, very inclusive. I take my personal journey, for example. I moved to Silicon Valley 26 years ago. I thought it might take several years for me to be part of this Silicon Valley. That's not the case. Literally within 4 or 5 months, I feel like this is my home. The reason why is the Silicon Valley is very inclusive, and no matter where you are coming from, and as long as you can contribute, right? Share your insights, ideas, work hard. Especially look at every business when it comes to innovation. One of the ways look at every startup company, Silicon Valley. You look at all those engineers, product managers, senior executive. They probably coming from all over the world, right? Again, I give another example. And take a Zoom. Our seed investor when I started a company, our investors, it's mainly like US and Japan and the Taiwan, and they give me all kinds of insights. about, hey, if your product wanted to focus on this market, that market, what can what do you want to do, right? Rather, I just get advice for all my friends investors in Silicon Valley, right? So whenever you can, right, to have very diversified talents, make sure your company culture inclusive is always give you a great return. So that's the reason why it's a very important topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Inagaki-san will pointed out that unity in Japan could be a strength, whereas we feel that we need more diversity and also inclusiveness, where Eric highlighted from personal experience that really propels innovation, and we see that in Silicon Valley. Can you respond to that from a Japan perspective?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dan and Eric, and also we live in a VUCA world. Unforeseeable future. And I think in this situation, well, the human resources will be, your human resources will be the key to navigate through this difficult world. And to have a labor force or a team that can sense the social challenge that we face, understand the values of our community, your workforce has to be diverse, and adding on to that, you need the thought leadership or the vision of the company to unite the diversity. So both elements are indispensable, and I think the success of Silicon Valley was that thought leadership was there, and people from different backgrounds gathered together on that leadership. So this is a CEO session. We have to think how to unite the diverse workforce that represents our community.
Thank you very much. So we've had a lot of stimulus and input from our panelists. Now this is time for our questions. First from the floor. I'd like to take 3 or so questions and direct it to the, okay. So I'll first start with you, 1, 2, 3. You were the first 3, so yes, the gentleman with the glasses, please. And then, both of you had glasses, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Hearing about ESG was very interesting, and this question is more towards Dan and Eric. I'd like to hear your opinions on, so governance in Japan and cost of agency. I'd like to hear what your perspective is from the American side. What do you think about the governance in Japan? And sort of what hints could you give to the Japanese CEOs here and how they could maybe change the system or correct themselves?
Thank you. Next question.
And just for governance, are you thinking about corporate governance, boardroom governance, or are you talking about country governance?
Corporate governance.
Yeah. So I first off, I'd say, and Eric, you.
Sorry, I'll take 3 questions and then put it in a batch and then have you respond. Thanks.
Tatsuya, I have a question about remote working to both Eric and Dan. Dan, you said that you have to convince and persuade your staff to come to work, and you have to earn them to commute. Can you elaborate on what will be your message to your staff to come to office? The same question goes to Eric as well.
Thank you. And we have, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the session. So I'm Masa, CEO at Startups. So Shinoda-san asked what I wanted to know. So 5 days to work in the office. So if you were in the very early stage startups, is there a possibility of choosing 5 days work to the office? And sorry, I have one question again. So
no, can you choose?
Yeah, so
I'll stick with that question.
Okay.
I'll stick with the first question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So first, Dan, would you take the corporate governance question? And Eric, can you respond to the 2 questions? How do you earn that credibility from your employees to have them come back to work? And number 2 is about in your very, very early startup phase, would you embrace 5 days in the office or allow hybrid work? Those are the 2 questions for you, Eric. So Dan, please go.
Yeah. So on the governance side, I do not consider myself an expert on Japanese corporate governance, to be clear. And I think there's a general view in the United States that the environment in Japanese companies are what we would call more clubby. So instead of having a lot of oversight by a separate governing body, as we would for public companies in the US, the management team and the sort of the board compositions they're closer. And there's a lot of things that I think sort of look like the US 30, 40 years ago is sort of the view. I'm not sure that's accurate, but that is my view, but it's probably just because that's what people in the US say. So I just want to be clear that that's where that's coming from. In terms, my view on that, I do think there's an opportunity to have companies be more successful by having a more distinct sort of governing team, which is usually going to be the board of directors, that are very independent from the management team. Now, the job of the board should be to support the management team to be successful, but they should be independent. And I think it's really important. And in terms of how to get there, I actually would recommend Japanese companies think about bringing people in from other countries, and it's very difficult because of the logistics, but having board membership from sort of different countries and from Europe or the US, where we do have different approaches, might help. You don't have to have everyone, but just one or two on a board might create some opportunity to see some of the best practices that we've developed. Not that we shouldn't also learn from Japanese best practices, but I do think there's an opportunity there for Japanese companies.
Dan, Eric, can you answer the two questions, please?
Yeah, maybe the start of the second one. I think if I start a company today for the startup, I think I will just embrace the full remote work. You really do not need to have office. The reason why is you can hire talents all over the world, right? And that's a benefit. All the tools available, save your money, and you do not need to rent an office and so on and so forth. Probably once or twice a year, you can gather your employees together. If you start from that model works, right? But in the future, if you have like a big company and you keep growing your business, like several thousand employees, if you really want to have like a satellite office somewhere, let's say, maybe a city where you have a lot of local employees, you can do that. For now, for every start of a company, I strongly recommend, 5 days remote. That's the best model to go. And back to the first question, how to win the employee trust. It's hard before you start taking actions, right? When we talk about we wanted to go back to the office twice a week, I can tell you it's the employee, they dislike that. So however, after we, and make that happen, already took actions, after the employee, they see the benefits. They see why they're doing that. They see the colleagues shake hands to each other. They think something exciting happening. I think, more and more they realize, wow, this is better, to get it together. To start with, it's hard to win the employee trust. In particular, we had so many new employees. If you have a culture where employees all trust you, you do not need to win the trust. The trust is already there. To build a trust, in particular for the newly hired employee, whenever change the process like this, it's really hard. So.
Thank you.
Makiko, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I finally found something I can strongly disagree with Eric on. If I had a new startup, I would have people 5 days in the office, maybe 4 days in the office together. I think I've never done a startup like Eric's done, but if I did it, that's how I believe that would be the best way to build a company.
Okay, thanks. That's great. Inagaki-san.
I'd like to come back on the point of corporate governance in Japan, because I think it is very important. So I was at the Prime Minister's residence on Friday with Larry Fink and BlackRock, all the institutional investors. So that conference was held by BlackRock, and it was about how Japan is tackling this opportunity of economic security and decarbonization and GX and everything. But among the discussion was without Kishida-san, but I was on the other meetings with the investors, and it was about corporate governance. So there's an opportunity set by Kishida under the leadership of Abe-san, Kishida-san, and can we really, the Japanese companies, deliver the returns on the investment? And I think that was a frustration for the foreign investors. And I'm a little bullish. I was a CEO until March, and the sentiment among the Japanese corporations is shifting drastically, in a sense. every CEO that I talk to, well, the major companies, address their cost of capital, how they can transform their business into the new climate that we now face. The JPX also is creating a new initiative to address and let the company explain who underperformed their book value, and those and the JFSA is pushing that really hard from the back scene. So I want to promise that it is coming, and I just wanted to comment from a Japanese CEO.
Thank you. I think we have time to take maybe one or two quick questions. Hands up, please. I'm sorry, one, nobody on this side, and the gentleman in the back, in the orange. Thank you.
Shall I go first?
Yeah,
Okay. So a bit of a question around ESG, how it's actually working. So PRI in person was a representative of how the investors are pushing ESG in the corporate settings. Inagaki-san has been one of those leaders in our Japanese investment community for that purpose. Now, actually, I have a question for Inagaki-san as well as Dan and Eric. That how is that actually translating in actual corporate setting? The investors are requesting lots of disclosures on ESG matters and whatnot, but is that actually working? And what can be done better?
Okay, thank you. Second question, please.
Yeah, exponential technology have a really big impact on the work. And if we are just pursuing optimizations, the management will think about what will be the role of a human in the organizations. I mean, less people, more value will be valid. But still, Inagaki-san mentioned the navigator will be the role of a human. So I'd like to ask about what is the role of a human in the organization?
Okay, so I'd like to ask Inagaki-san to take the ESG investor question and the role of people in the organization. Can I ask Dan to respond? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, there is challenge. Yes, it's not an easy answer. Japan itself doesn't have a clear pathway towards 2050 net zero world, and the technology is there. But I personally think that the technology is there, but we don't have the business plan to accomplish that, and there are various social issues that we have to address. So it is not an easy path, but life insurance is an institutional investor. I engage with a lot of company CEOs, but they are addressing this issue at the center, and they are discussing that issue at the center of their board. So I'm an optimist. I'm a natural optimist. So I think that we are moving in a right direction, and I think this trend will accelerate going forward.
Thank you. And Dan, please.
I'm not sure I understood completely the people question. So if Eric did understand it, I'll pass it to him. But otherwise, you can maybe give me more detail. But I would take one thing on the
please go ahead.
On the ESG. I think in the U.S. it's very clear the diversity initiatives are having traction. We can definitely do better, but they're making traction. But the climate ones are not. We have a time frame that's just too far out, and people are making statements about what they're going to do when that entire management team will be retired. So that we're not making progress on that front.
Eric, if I can rephrase the question very quickly, technological advancement seems to drive management towards less people in the workforce. And is that the direction that we're heading? How do we assess or combat this situation?
I think yes and no. For some of the areas, right? Like take software engineers, right? With AI technology, down the road, probably you do not need to have a junior engineers. That's very true. Give the technology advance like AI, probably for marketing team, really do not have so many people to write marketing materials and so on and so forth. That's for sure. However, in other areas, you probably need to hire more people as well, right? Like a support team, right? And customer support, customer success managers, and probably can hire more salespeople as well. Ultimately, I think we never have a new technology. I fundamentally believe that will make our lives better, will improve productivity. Don't just focus on the specific one area for the foreseeable future. Maybe there's a problem. In the long run, technology will help us more. You will hire more and more people if you really want to grow the business. It's not like, hey, with technology, you really do not need a lot of people in the future. I do not think that's the case.
If may I add to Eric's comment, in the report I introduced on the onset of this discussion, the punchline or the bottom line says that new technologies will change the nature of our labor market, but will not necessarily reduce the number of jobs. So the roles of humans will be different. Yeah.
Thank you. That was an excellent recap of the discussion that we had today. Thank you very much for all the participants and the panelists. A big applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.